Hello, welcome to another session of the Catholic Novel. Today we're going to talk about Walker Percy's The Last Gentleman. Now I'm going to start this show off, and I'm a little bit self-conscious. It's going to seem as though I'm patting myself on the back. You're going to have to take my word. That's not the reason I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm going to read something from an introduction to a book I wrote. I'll explain why I do this. I wrote a book on Walker Percy. It came out in 1996, and I asked the very well-known child psychiatrist Robert Coles to write the introduction. Robert Coles was a great fan of Walker Percy. He had written a book about Walker Percy, as a matter of fact, and he wrote this glowing introduction. And when I read it more than 20 years ago, I was very touched by it. But I read it recently, preparing for this show, and it gave me a really strange experience, and I'll explain that in a second. So this is what Robert Coles said in his introduction. Father Lauder proves himself to be not only an admirer of Percy, but a skillful, lucid narrator, bent on giving us a particular fictional world in the hope that we will want to explore it, or in the case for some of us, visit it yet again. What follows then is an appreciative, sensitive, generous response to a body of work, a response offered as a celebration, a lesson, an evocation, and recommendation, all in the hope that we, in turn, will find our own way of connecting with Walker Percy, whose apt, finely honed skills as a novelist and moral diagnostician of our time make him the much-needed spiritual companion so many of us need and seek, and not rarely despair of ever finding. If Father Lauder will have helped a few more of us to make such a connection, such a discovery, then he will indeed have earned our gratitude, addressed our situation, and I do believe prompted a smile from the humble yet brilliantly inspired and accomplished spirit of Dr. Percy, which still is very much with us, and one hopes and prays always will be an important presence among us. Of course, I was thrilled that Robert Coles wrote those, but as I reread it, I realized something strange has happened between me and Walker Percy. When Robert Coles wrote that, and of course when I wrote the book, Percy was already dead. I think I started the book about a year after he died. I feel very close to him. Now, I don't want to get mystical about this, but as I've been rereading his books and thinking about Dr. Coles's introduction, I realized that in some very basic way, Walker Percy's vocation was the same as my vocation. Here's what I mean. I certainly am not comparing myself to Walker Percy. This man was a great novelist. I think he was one of the most important novelists in the second half of the 20th century. But what he does in book after book after book is try to call our attention to the mystery of the human person and then opening us to the mystery of God. And in almost every philosophy course I teach, my first class is on mystery. And I don't know how good I am at this. I'm trying to get the students to have a sense of awe, a sense of wonder. I know I had a tough time getting it when I was an undergrad. I think it's very hard for undergraduates to get this because they've got term papers. A lot of the students have jobs. They've got a social life. They've got telephones, you know. But that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what Walker Percy tried to do in novel after novel. Help us to see what many people in the contemporary world have missed. So I believe in the communion of saints. So yesterday I offered Mass for Walker Percy, and I believe it's quite possible that he is praying for me and sending me messages from beyond the grave. Now, of course, I can't prove any of that, but that's how I think. I think of the communion of saints, we're all connected. And right now, I feel very close to Walker Percy, and I really miss him. I mean, I'm almost tempted saying, Walker Percy, where are you now that we need you? Because I find the books are more important today than they were when they were written 50 or 40 or 30 years ago, the novels I'm talking about. So the one we're going to do today is The Last Gentleman, and in the epigraph, Percy quotes Romano Guardini. Now, just in case some of you have not heard of Romano Guardini, when I was in the seminary in the 1950s, he was easily the most popular spiritual writer. I had several of his books. There was a practice in those days of having a book sale. And publishers would send new books to the seminary, and it was a big deal. It was a whole afternoon. Some professors would come in and recommend certain books. And I found a book by Romano Guardini. It was 2 essays the church and the Catholic and the spirit of the liturgy. And I went around telling all my friends, this is special, try to get a hold of this and so on. And of course, a number of them did, and I thought they were great. I thought the book was just absolutely great. So here's the quote. Now, I read this quote more than 30 years ago. I understood it somewhat, but I think it's more fitting today. It's more relevant today. So here's the quote from a book called The End of the Modern World. We know now that the modern world is coming to an end. At the same time, the unbeliever will emerge from the fogs of secularism. He will cease to reap benefit from the values and forces developed by the very revelation he denies. Loneliness in faith will be terrible. Love will disappear from the face of the public world. But the more precious will be that love which flows from one lonely person to another. The world to come will be filled with animosity and danger, but it will be a world open and clear. I thought Guardini was onto something many years ago when he wrote it. I find the quote more applicable today. So let's dig into The Last Gentleman. It's the story of Will Barrett. The opening scene is he's looking through a telescope. So right away, it's said he's a typical Percy hero searching for a meaning. And several times in the first couple of pages when he's referred to, he's not given a name. He's referred to in the third person. So the theme of, this guy has sort of lost his personhood. He's trying to find himself. He's trying to figure out what it all adds up to. It's set right away. Now, if he finds himself in the novel, and I have an opinion about that, which I'll tell you before I finish, he does it through a family he links up with, the Vaught family, V-A-U-G-H-T. In that family is a 16-year-old boy, Jamie, who is very seriously sick, in fact, dying. His brother, Sutter, S-U-T-T-E-R, who is a doctor. Sutter's wife, from whom he is divorced, Rita, and she's a kind of a symbol of secularism and a kind of a spokesperson for secularism. And another sister, Val, who literally is Sister Val, religious. And she spends her life in a settlement house with poor black children, trying to teach them language. Rita, as I said, is a spokesman for secularism. She thinks, the cure for Jamie is take him out and let him meet a couple of chicks. Sutter is planning his own suicide. He has written an article, the incidents, I think it's the incidence of suicide in post-orgasmic experience of medical students. The point Percy's making is so much of theory takes you out of the world. One way people try to enter again, become immanent, be in touch with reality is through sex, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work unless somehow it's containing the transcendent. So Sutter is planning his own suicide, and Will Barrett becomes aware of that. Sister Val in the novel gets Will to promise that he'll make sure Jamie is baptized before he dies. So the last few pages of the novel are the most touching, and I found tremendously inspiring in Percy's novels. One of the most touching scenes. Jamie is dying. Will Barrett, who is not a believer, has called for the priest. So he is present in the hospital room. The priest shows up. His name is Father Boomer, and Percy does what I think Graham Greene did often. I think a number of Catholic writers do it. He's not humanly a terribly attractive person. I think someone referred to him as a kind of a workaday priest. He's there. He's going to give the last sacraments, but he's not a person you'd want to, you want to sit down and have a serious talk with. At least he doesn't appear that way anyway. So he's there. Sutter is there. Jamie is dying, and Will Barrett is there. Now we believe as Catholics that Christ is the mediator. But after Christ, other people can mediate between God and us. So Sister Val has mediated by getting Will Barrett to promise that he would see that Jamie got baptized before he died. Sutter is there helping the priest understand what's going on, though Sutter does not believe either. Will is there sort of as an intermediary, telling Jamie what the priest is saying and telling the priest what Jamie is saying. And at one point, the priest presents to Jamie, do you believe this? Do you believe in God? Do you believe he died for us? Do you believe in the Roman Catholic Church? And so on. And Jamie, through Will Barrett, says, well, why should I believe that? And either the priest, I think the priest says, because it's true. And Jamie says, well, how do I know it's true? And Father Boomer says, well, if it wasn't true, I wouldn't be here. The very fact that I'm here shows you that it's true. So they get Jamie baptized, and then shortly after that, he dies. When Sutter leaves, Will Barrett runs after him. He knows that Sutter is planning suicide, and he says to him, well, what went on back there? What was that all about? And Sutter says, well, you were there. I know, but I wonder what you think. He says, well, what does it matter what I think? So he gets into his car and starts to drive away, and Will Barrett runs after him. He says, wait, something happened. You know, the whole image is something happened in that room. And Barrett is beginning to believe. And Sutter is very impatient, but you know that he's also wondering about this whole experience. And so it's a question of being mediated, and also the importance of language. Remember, St. Paul says, faith comes through hearing. And Sister Val is working with these black children. She says when they begin to talk, it's like Adam on the first day, that all sorts of things they're interested in. And Walker Percy, one of his daughters, was deaf, so he was very interested in language. And I remember he wrote in one of his essays, it's amazing that we spend millions of dollars trying to help gorillas speak, and we miss the mystery of human speech, which was really a mystery. You know, Walker Percy makes marks on a piece of paper, and we read them, and they have a tremendous meaning to us. So language is a tremendous gift, and Percy thought that this was perhaps one of the great ways we could enter into the mystery of the human person. So I love The Last Gentleman when I read it originally, but I think it's so much more relevant. And I'm not kidding now, I really feel a kind of a deep relationship with Walker Percy. I never met him, but we did exchange mail. After he died, I wrote to his wife, and she wrote back to me and said, Walker used to say, I have something to say, and I'm going to say it. And I'm very grateful that he did. I'm not exaggerating when I say I think he is one of the most important novelists of the second half of the 20th century. So I encourage you to read The Last Gentleman, read it carefully. Keep your eyes open for all kinds of signs and all kinds of messages. I think they're in there. And I think without preaching, or without turning the novel into a sermon, Walker Percy really illuminates the mystery of faith. So try The Last Gentleman.